to set up situations where you do fail. Because if you don't fail, then the successes mean nothing. And soon you're living a life of your dreams, a complexity of struggle, of pain. And he says you're living a life much like the life you live now. There's a deep insight here, which is that the good things in life only make sense relative to the bad things. If you win every competition you engage in, there's no fun to count out the possibility of loss. If all of your experiences are positive, they cease to become positive. You need the negative. From a winning perspective, it's no mystery why we seek out good food, good sex, good company, all of that good stuff. But people do more than that. People often choose to suffer. And they do so in ways that go from small to big. So the small, something like hot chilies, working your way through a crossword puzzle, saunas, hot baths, scary movies, massaging, running till it hurts. Moving it up a bit, some people willingly engage in projects that involve a lot of suffering and difficulty. No one who decides to have a kid is unaware that this is going to be difficult. If you were in such good shape that training for a triathlon was easy, you wouldn't have much meaning for it. But the difficulty is part and parcel of things. It's part of what makes it valuable. I've long been interested in the relationship between a life and meaning and choices. Meaning, an inexorable weight in space, inexorable meaning, in common sense, is infinitely related to how it works. I'm so promised to say that because in life, we learn something. We don't know really how to probably isn't was a survey done. And the survey asked, what's your job? And the most meaningful jobs were not the jobs that were high status. They were the jobs that paid bills. They were jobs like being an educator, a medical professional, military, that involved
Stun grenade!
difficulty.
Stun grenade out! Loading pressure!
In our lives, the whole spectrum of suffering. Things so mild, they barely deserve the name. You know, eating something spicy, working your way through a process, no reward, nothing, you just do it because it's hard. It's a way to sort of reduce that structure of our lives. And I'm going to make a pretty strong claim here. The way people think about meaning, our very notion of what a meaningful experience, or a meaningful goal, or a meaningful life is that it requires some degree of suffering.
Enemy KIA!
Difficulty, it could be worrying, it could be a possibility of failure.
We've lost the lead.
The experience isn't meaningful. We need pain and suffering to have rich and happy lives.
Changing mags! Eye for an eye! Contact!
Suffering, even collective suffering that we're going through, is often
Requesting recon flyover!
Loading this son of a bitch!
Resilience is
Hostile
absolutely
UAV in the
critical to
area.
accomplishing a mission.
I had a choice on whether to
Difficult experiences are part of life. They're part of our contract with the world simply by virtue of being here.
The enemy's taken the lead.
UAV is exiting the AO. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that gets at the idea, psychological principle, of anti-fragility. It's a wonderful term. That's actually a clunky, ugly term, but it was made up by Nassim Taleb because we don't have a word for this in English language, which is that there are some systems
We've secured
that
the lead.
get stronger if they get greater outnumbered. So wine glass is fragile, nothing good
Eye for an
happens.
eye!
The plastic cup is resilient. If a kid throws it off the table, it doesn't break, but nothing good happens. But there's some things that have to get thrown off the table. There's some systems that have to get pushed around. Things like the banking system had to be tested, or it gets fragile and collapses. Phones have to be tested, used. They get weak. If you were to fly to Mars, phones would get weak. The immune system, kids from that still environment. You're damaging your immune system. The immune system has to face challenges in order to learn.
Life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility. You are healthy until you you are not. You are with the people that you love. You have a job that you love. So for some reason, that job no longer works out. It is
friendly.
that as human beings we develop our capacity to protect our feelings and emotions in a way
UAV ready to deploy.
that embraces them and is with them and is able to learn from them.
The old idea of
Loading fresh mag.
enjoy was that happiness was a sort of tranquility. So this is really all about a recipe for avoiding
You're halfway to mission complete.
unnecessary
Finish
disturbance and anxiety. So you don't try and control things you can't. Now the only thing you can control are your thoughts and your actions. That's it. And if you're outside of your thoughts and actions of your mind, then they are.
Standing by.
To avoid unnecessary disturbance and anxiety. The opposite of optimistic thinking is the American obsession, forgive me, with positive thinking and optimism. You can by
Requesting
believing
closer.
yourself set
Target marked.
goals.
Copy that. Stagger 4 inbound.
Whoa.
Overarching societal messaging that we are hearing, which is that we
Need
should
recon
focus on
Copy.
being happier,
UAV is on station.
that we should
Recon online.
choose to be happy, and that we should
UAV down. Recon
not
online.
happiness. But what I'm concerned about in
Loading fresh mag.
this is that I think what it is actually paradoxically doing is setting people up
Mission time is
for
half
greater
over.
levels
Maintain the
of
lead.
unhappiness. Let me explain why. First, what we know is that people
Friendly
focus
UAV online.
time and time again on being happier. When they set it as a goal, when they value that idea of there's a body of research that shows
Changing mag.
become less happy. Now, why is this? One of the things that I talk about in my book, Emotional Agility, is the idea that expectations are disappointments waiting to happen. When we overvalue the idea of being happy as a goal, we essentially up to perceive every slight, every disappointment as a marker of and proof of the fact that we aren't achieving that goal effectively. So in a strange way, valuing happiness is not ultimately the way
Enemy UAV active.
You know, I flew in this morning from LA. We're here in New York. And something that I'll repeat in my head over and over is resist nothing. Which seems so silly, but to me it's a real key to happiness. It's trying to,
Reloading.
again, Richard Rohr says, love is trying to say yes to what is. And that is one of the fundamental principles of this sort of thought. Is learning to say yes to it. As Eckhart Tolle says, it's madness to resist what's happening. Madness.
Hostile
Obviously,
UAV in the
change
area.
something if something's unpleasant, it's painful. Yeah, resist. Like, I'm all for that. But if you're
Ready
fighting,
to action.
UAV on station.
you
Contact.
start suffering. So, you're not understanding.
Sniper's down.
Suffering happens when you start, and you can watch this happen from what I witnessed. Right? You watch yourself constructing a story.
Requesting recon
This
flyover.
is where suffering
Copy. UAV
is your
on station.
attachment.
Recon
You have
online.
to think things should be. And of course, I still do this. Please don't think I'm sitting in a chair. Delta or United
The mission's
should
complete.
do better.
Good
They're
work.
always doing this. That's like the first level. And then you start going like, I'm going to miss this thing. I'm going to be late to the dinner. And damn it, my ticket costs this much. And, you know, this is the narrative. And you go, really, something has happened. The flight is delayed. Maybe it was completely preventable, but it's happening. You need to find a quiet place inside where just the fundamental fact that you are participating in reality is enough value and dignity to draw upon at any moment. You only change through suffering. Otherwise, why would you change? Why would you change? It's working. The things I learned about resilience through my time in prison is that human beings, I believe by nature, are very insecure. And oftentimes we don't recognize our own resiliency until we're faced with obstacles and circumstances that challenge us and pushes us. And it looks different for everybody. You know, when I think about my journey in prison, I went through some very adverse experiences. I had some significant obstacles to overcome, including, long-term solitary confinement, which they estimate is designed to drive a person crazy after 90 days. And what I found in that environment is that people figure out ways to cope and to survive when they're forced to do so. And for me, I found that I was very resourceful when my back was against the wall. If you acknowledge what you're going through and you recognize that it is an obstacle, that is that dark moment, but you also realize there's light on the other side of that tunnel, then you can get through. And to me, I think hope is probably the cornerstone of resilience. As long as you have hope, you can come out on the other side of anything. Once you dim the light of hope, there's no possibility of you coming out on the other side. And to me, I think that's what resiliency is. I always look at, if I focus on the purpose instead of the pain, then I can get through to the other side. And that's how I live my life. And to me, those things embody what resilience really is. I would think three ingredients toward being resilient is you have to be optimistic.
Free for all.
Optimism is
Weapons
such
free.
an integral
Engage all
part
threats on target.
of getting through adversity. I would say a second thing is really being resourceful and figuring out the environment. What are things you can utilize to help you cope with whatever it is you're going through? And I think the third thing would be you have to have memory loss. That probably sounds crazy, right? But what I found is that a lot of times we replay memories that no longer exist over and over in our head, and what that does is it ruins you honestly. Once you begin to release those things and recognize that you can never reclaim that space or that time or that experience, then you can move forward in life. Now and you're a lot more mobile. And I think in order to be resilient, you have to not be thinking about what happened in the past. You have to be focused on what you need to do to move forward.
The first step of honing and strengthening our resilience muscles is to take the first step into the fear, into the unknown, into the uncertainty that all of us, including the leader, have within themselves. It doesn't have to be a big step. You're not leaping a building. You don't have a superhuman cape or wand or Gandalf's magic. You do have the ability to step one small step into
Hostile
it.
UAV in the
The
area.
wonderful thing about charting the stories over time of leaders is you learn that each of get more resilient and a little bit more about stepping into the fear and a little more brave about stepping into the fear with each step that they take. And so it's accretive. It's about the mileage of moving into our fear just with a tiny step, tightening our core, squaring our
Enemy
shoulders,
UAV
moving
active.
into it, and then getting more access to our inner strength, getting more access to our resilience. So resilience is absolutely critical. And yet, I am absolutely certain that it doesn't come from on high. We can't download it on our iPhones. We can discover it in ourselves and develop it in ourselves and find it stronger and easier to get each time as we move forward.
Get smarter, faster. Videos from the world's biggest thinkers. To learn even more from the world's biggest thinkers, get Big Think Plus for your business. This episode was pre-recorded as part of a live continuing education webinar. On-demand CEUs are still available for this presentation through all CEUs.
Register at allceus.com/consular toolbox. Today's presentation on neurobiology. Dopamine, GABA, serotonin, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and glutamate. So hopefully it's a little bit longer than it usually is in terms of the number of slides, but there are a lot of things that I'm going to go through quickly because you'll be able to go back and reference them, and they don't need a whole lot of explanation. As always, if you have something to add, if you have a comment, question, please feel free to type that in the chat window, and I will answer it or segue it in as soon as I can. So we're going to define neurobiology, and for the following neurotransmitters, the big things, mechanism of thinking, why where are they found? And I know, the brain, but where else are they found? Symptoms of excess and insufficiency, because when we're looking at anxiety, when we're looking at fatigue, when we're looking at difficulty concentrating, there are a lot of symptoms that are transdiagnostic. They're present in multiple diagnoses, and they can be caused by different things. We'll look at nutritional building blocks for each neurotransmitter because I always harp on having reasonable nutrition, and reasonable is, you'll see as we go through. And then we'll look at some medications that are used to increase and decrease, or medications that may inadvertently increase and decrease the neurotransmitters of the brain. So neurobiology is the study of the brain and the nervous system, which generates sensation, perception, movement, learning, emotion, and many of the functions that just make us human. When we have an emotion, where does that come from? Well, it's a chemical reaction that whatever happens kicks off a chemical reaction. And if we're getting upset or getting stressed or getting excited, then we're going to have glutamate and norepinephrine and dopamine probably going out if we're excited, for example. So we want to pay attention to that. If we're calming down, then we're going to have GABA, serotonin kind of coming in and saying, it's time to rest and relax. So emotions, or what we label as emotions, are triggered by neurochemicals. And why is that important? Well, because if somebody comes in and they're trying to address their depression, whatever that looks like for them, well, that's great. But they need to understand where that's coming from. There are lots of things that can trigger that, their brain to think that there's a threat, which sets off the stress response. And they need to understand that there is a neurochemical, biological component to it. So it's not just about changing their thinking. They also need to be making sure that their body machine is in top working order. So think about it. As we go through this presentation, you have a client who presents with apathy, loss of pleasure, sleep disturbances, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating. Yeah, my first thought is major depressive disorder or persistent depressive disorder. What would your diagnosis be? And you may say, too little information yet. That would be a great answer too. If somebody presented to their physician with these symptoms,
4 years ago, America and the rest of the world saw its most intense spike in unemployment in recorded history. In today's news cycle, that is ancient history. But what isn't ignored is what has been left behind. There are now over 10 million people, mostly men in America, who are not working, not studying, not retired, and not institutionalized. They're just doing nothing. COVID accelerated this trend, but it's been going on for decades. Since the 1960s, about 0.1% of American men have given up on work to never come back every single month. So why are so many people giving up so consistently? And more importantly, how are these people surviving without a job in this economy?
Mississippi's labor force participation rate was nearly 54%, while the national rate was over 62%. How many jobs on these two websites?
It's been over 1,000 combined. They're not working and they're not looking for a job, and those are the folks that we have to get into the labor market.
Why aren't some Americans getting back to work? The million-dollar question.
There are a lot of reasons why someone might not participate in the labor force. They might have retired, they might be still studying for qualifications, there might be people who are too sick to work, stay-at-home spouses, members of the military who are clearly working but don't officially count as part of the labor force, and then of course there are just really rich people who don't need to work to maintain their lifestyle. These groups have always existed, but there is a new group growing alongside them, which are people who have just given up. The fastest growing group is labor force dropouts have been
Like that is clearly lacking a lot of what she needs in terms of community outside of the field, and that the prison system is not providing its way to transition outside of the field. So people are just going through this revolving door, even in their 70s, they have to go back. Particularly elderly women who are extremely likely to live in poverty. Nearly half of elderly women who are 65 or older who live alone are in poverty, and 29% for senior men. And it can be easy to think of families as being the ones who took everything from us. But poverty amongst old age is a huge problem, and it's clearly a huge driving factor for people who choose to make this decision. One thing that did surprise me is that a lot of these elderly people who choose to go to prison have families. Everyone who Bloomberg interviewed actually has family, whether it's a daughter or a son. There's a broader sense of community, or felt that their family didn't necessarily provide the attention and care they needed. Japan is a relatively collectivist culture, and there are more social expectations to gather as families. This is being eroded even there. Despite the fact that I said this is a Japanese problem, it's also a problem in...
Despite the millions of job openings that are apparently out there, it's harder than ever to get hired. The news is constantly telling us that companies are desperate for workers and that there's tons of jobs just waiting to be filled. Meanwhile, there's stories everywhere of people sending out tens or hundreds of applications without ever getting a single interview. It just doesn't make sense. So what really happened to turn finding work into a full-time job? A few decades ago, even when there were job shortages, it was still much easier to get a good job. The advice that boomers give the person on the time asking a manager for a job really worked. All it took was enough tries before you finally met someone who liked you. Today, you could try this thousands of times and they still wouldn't get a chance. One difference that's easy to notice is that the bar for entry has gotten significantly higher for most jobs. Before 2000, a good college degree was almost a guarantee of a good job. Companies would compete with each other to get the most recent graduates. They would also offer a wage that could support a family. If they didn't, they wouldn't get any employees. But now the tables have completely turned, and they're only really interested in the very top percent of students. What used to amount to a free entry ticket has become the very minimum of what they expect. Despite over 70% of listed jobs requiring a bachelor's degree, only a bit over 30% of American adults actually have one. But you don't just need a good degree, of course. You also need real-world experience, even for so-called entry-level positions. Companies are so picky now that they're asking people who have just left college to have years worth of experience, all for a salary they can barely survive on. The only way to get this is to work while studying full-time, which is rarely possible if you need to do an internship or field trip. Fast ways to develop content. There were still job shortages and still projects. The key difference between then and now is the massive rise in competition because of the internet. If you were a company in the 1980s looking to hire a few new employees, you didn't really have many options. Small companies physical leaflets posted. It was a slow, long process with only a few applicants to choose from. Hiring managers had to treat each applicant like a real person, using their own judgment to figure out who would be the best fit. Large companies only had a few hundred tools at their disposal. With their size, they could get a foot in the door in colleges or high schools and more applications level. But even then, there was still much more limited. So just think about how much this process has changed in such a short time. If any company wants an employee, all they need to do is put a listing out on many websites with that explicit requirements. And this will almost immediately be seen by thousands and thousands of people. Along with a whole wave of spread it without any barriers to these jobs can get thousands of applicants. There's no reason not to try and work, so why not send off 50 applications? As it's gotten harder and people to send applications to get a chance, it's only consequence.
Oh my god.
If you're using your personal phone number to close business deals, you're not just mixing work and play, but you're sabotaging your chances of success. Recently, I've been doing a bunch of traveling. I've been trying to operate my business through just my personal phone. It was a terrible idea. You can't really communicate with people properly. You're trying to manage all these different sections of your business with multiple different apps. You lose track of everything. It's just an absolute nightmare. Especially when other people notice this and don't take you as seriously because you're just fun. Not only can this look amateur, but you and your team are probably using 18 different apps to get your work done, right? That was my case, which is why I want to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Nextiva, where you can cut down on all of this to just one app. Nextiva consolidates your business voice, text, video meetings, and CRM inside of one app. You get seamless, personalized customer interactions across all channels, and you can do this even if you're currently running your business off of your personal phone, and your CRM is a spreadsheet. You don't need any tech experience, you just need to download their app and follow the easy setup. You can make this one change and your business will look as polished as a Fortune 500 company, and you'll be able to focus on closing and scaling up your business. This is the year to level up your business and lower your costs. Go to trynextiva.com/moon or use the link down below in the description to get 50% off your plan. It's exactly the same thing that's happened to dating. Modern technology has monopolized the potential for competition. Finding a job or a partner needs to be so much more personal. It all hinges on the impression you gave from the person. How you fill out your application form is much more important than anything else. And as a result, the standards have also gone up by ludicrous amounts on job sites and dating sites. It makes people and companies think they have far higher standards because they have so much more choice. The reality on the ground, though, has really changed, and the effects that it's had on the job market have been catastrophic. It's led to the whole process getting much more dehumanizing for applicants, being turned into numbers on a spreadsheet. So those are the biggest reasons why finding a job used to be much easier than it is today. The real devil is in the details. Even with all of these changes, finding work really shouldn't take hours of searching and hundreds of applications. The reason it's all so frustrating is things that companies have done to deal with this new reality. So let's explore the different ways they found to make getting hired even harder. Today, the problem for companies has been completely reversed. Instead of not getting good enough applications to choose from, they get hundreds or thousands more than they need. Every time they need to hire someone new, it means reading through hundreds of applications and filtering out all the ones that aren't suited. In a perfect world, companies would put more time and effort into this. We all know that. Instead, they've turned to one of the most frustrating and dehumanizing parts of the modern job market, automatic rejection systems. Today, over 97% of Fortune 500 companies use what's referred to as ATS, applicant tracking system. The basic idea is an ATS process, filtering out any applications that don't meet whatever requirements the employer has set. When it first came into widespread use in the early 2000s with the rise of the internet, they could only deal with a few basic questions. If someone ticks the box saying they're not legally allowed to work, for example, they'd get rejected. Today, ATS companies advertise their services to the public like this is still the only thing they do. Companies like Greenhouse, Lever, and Workday have to admit their products automatically reject people. It's far too obvious for them to deny it, but they try to give the impression that it's only a few deep questions that do this. Of course, this isn't the case at all. Rejection questions, where giving the wrong answer puts your CV in the reject pile, are everywhere today. In fact, they're only the first hurdle an applicant needs to get past to be the machine. As the internet becomes the main place to search for jobs, ATS companies had to adapt. They needed to keep up with the increasing amount of applications, so they added more rejection questions. Instead of just filtering out the people you legally can't hire, they started giving companies the option to reject people based on whatever legal criteria they wanted. Your address, your experience, any question they ask can be the difference between getting an interview or getting ghosted. Normally, they don't outright reject CVs, of course, they just rank them all based on the criteria they're using. Technically, all an ATS really does is turn tons of applications into a ranked list of candidates. If you end up in the bottom of the pile though, or anywhere near it at the very top, you'll never get looked at anyway. An ATS probably won't automatically reject you, it will just put you so far back in the queue that you might as well not even be there. But even this approach still left too many applications for companies to look through. To fix it, they made the ATS able to read the CV itself. Today, these systems can go through applications and then have certain keywords they want to see. If you didn't use those certain words they wanted, you end up at the back of the queue and eventually get rejected. They can also read how much experience you have in certain areas, making note of everyone who doesn't make the cut. Even today, these systems are far from perfect. If you don't have the same keywords they use in the job posting, then your CV can often end up in the bottom of the pile, regardless of whether you're qualified or not. Similar problems can come from how you format your CV. Some templates don't get read as well by the system, and they miss out important parts and unfairly reject people. There are ways to avoid this, like making sure you use the same words they use in the adverts, or using a standard template that the system will be designed to read. At the end of the day though, it's not something that people should have to do. Rewriting your entire CV every time is part of making money with your so bullshit. especially when you just get ghosted over and over again. Pretty much every single company that makes use of these systems, but even with almost 100% adoption, the situation could still get worse. AI is perfectly suited for use in ATS. It's already widespread, and it makes these programs far better at understanding people's CVs and filtering people out. So companies will be eager to cut out just a little bit more of the human element from finding new employees, as they might just save a little bit extra on personal cost. This is the crux of the problem with ATS and how they've taken over the entire process. Finding a job used to be a human experience, where you were an elite, as they might just save a little, and it makes these programs far better at understanding people's CVs and filtering people out. So companies will be eager to cut out just a little bit more of the human element from finding new employees, as they might just save a little bit extra on personnel costs. This is the crux